The storm is brewing, the skies are torn. A songbird whispers where the thorns are worn. In the capital's shadow, the air turns gray. The spark of rebellion sings through Lucy Gray.
A crown of frost, a heart of stone, snow's ambition carves a throne.
The spark and the snow, the clash and the cry, the mockingbird song pierces the sky. A flame in the dark, a world set aglow. Destiny turns in the spark and the snow. In the district's fields, the hunger grows. The whip cracks louder where the cold wind blows.
Her voice cuts through like a silver blade, a tune of defiance, the tyrant betrayed.
A chorus rising, shadows break.
The mockingbird stirs what power can't take.
The spark and the snow, the clash and the cry, the mockingbird song pierces the sky. A flame in the dark, a world set aglow. Destiny turns in the spark and the snow.
He could not have felt more exposed had he been standing naked in the middle of the Corso. At least then he would have had the option to escape. Now he was trapped and on display, for the first time appreciating the animal's inability to hide. Children had begun to chatter excitedly and point at his school uniform, drawing the attention of the adults. Faces were filling all the available space between the bars. But the real horror was a pair of cameras positioned at either end of the visitors, Capital News. With their omnipresent coverage and their saucy slogan, if you didn't see it here, it didn't happen, oh, it was happening. To him, now. He could feel his image going live all over the capital. Fortunately, shock rooted him to the spot, because the only thing worse than him standing among the district riffraff in the zoo would be him running around like a fool trying to escape. There was no easy way out. It was built for wild animals. Attempting to hide would be even more pathetic. Imagine how delicious that footage would be for Capital News. They would play it ad nauseum, add silly music and captions. Snow's meltdown. Make it part of the weather report. Too hot for snow. They would rerun it as long as he lived. His disgrace would be complete. What option did that leave him? Only to stand his ground, looking the cameras dead in the eye until he was rescued. He straightened up to his full height, subtly shifted back his shoulders, and attempted to look bored. The audience began to call out to him. First the high-pitched children's voices, then the adults joining in, asking what he was doing. Why was he in the cage? Did he need help? Someone recognized him, and his name spread like wildfire through the crowd, which was becoming deeper by the minute. It's the Snow Boy. Who's that again? You know, the ones with the roses on their roof? Who were all these people hanging around on a weekday at the zoo? Didn't they have jobs? Shouldn't the children be in school? No wonder the country was such a mess. The district tributes began to circle, taunting him. There was the pair from District 11, and the vicious little boy who had called for his death, and several new ones too. He remembered the hatred in the truck, and wondered what would happen if they attacked him as a pack. Perhaps the audience would only cheer them on. Coriolanus tried not to panic, but he could feel sweat running down his sides. All the faces of the nearby tributes, of the crowd at the bars, began to blur. Their features became indistinct, leaving only dark and light patches of skin broken by the pinkish red of their open mouths. His limbs felt numb, his lungs starved for air. He was beginning to consider making a break for the chute and attempting to climb it when a voice behind him softly said, "Own it." Without turning, he knew it was the girl, his girl, and he felt immense relief that he was not entirely alone. He thought of how cleverly she had played the audience after the mayor's assault, how she had won them all with her song. She was right, of course. He had to make this moment look intentional, or it was all over. He took a deep breath and turned to where she sat, casually fixing the white rose behind her ear. She always seemed to be improving her appearance. Arranging her ruffles in District 12, grooming her hair at the train station, and now adorning herself with the rose. He extended his hand to her as if she was the grandest lady in the capital. The edges of Lucy Gray's mouth curled up. As she took his hand, her touch sent a tiny electrical spark up his arm, and he felt as if a bit of her onstage charisma had been transferred to him. He made a small bow as she stood with exaggerated elegance. She's on stage. You're on stage. This is the show, he thought. He lifted his head and asked, "Would you care to meet a few of my neighbors?" "I would be delighted," she said, as if they were at an afternoon tea. "My left side is better," she murmured, lightly brushing her cheek. He wasn't sure what to do with the information, so he started to guide her to the left. Lucy Gray gave the spectators a big smile, seemingly pleased to be there. But as he led her to the bars, he could feel her fingers clenching his like a vice. A shallow moat that ran between the rocky structures and the bars of the monkey house had once formed a watery barrier between the animals and the visitors, but it was bone dry now. They descended 3 steps, crossed the moat, and climbed back up to a shelf that ran around the enclosure, putting them eye to eye with the patrons. Coriolanus chose a spot several yards from one of the cameras, let it come to him, where a gaggle of small children stood in a cluster. The bars were spaced about 4 inches apart, not enough room to slide a whole body between, but ample if you wanted to reach your hand through. The children fell silent as they approached, pressing back into their parents' legs. Coriolanus thought the afternoon tea image was as good as any, so he continued to treat the situation with the same lightness. "How do you do?" he said, leaning over to the children. "I brought along a friend of mine today. Would you like to meet her?" The children shifted around, and there were a few giggles. Then one little boy shouted, "Yes." He slapped the bars with his hands a few times, then shoved them in his pockets uncertainly. "We saw her on the television." Coriolanus led Lucy Gray right up to the bars. "May I present Miss Lucy Gray Baird?" The audience had fallen silent now, nervous at her proximity to the children, but eager to hear what the strange tribute was going to say. Lucy Gray went down on one knee about a foot from the bars. "Hi there, I'm Lucy Gray. What's your name?" "Pontius," the boy said, glancing up to his mother for reassurance. She looked warily at Lucy Gray, but the girl ignored her. "How do you do, Pontius?" she said. Like any well-bred capital lad, the boy thrust his hand out to shake. Lucy Gray raised her hand to meet his, but refrained from sticking it through the bars, which might have appeared threatening. As a result, it was the boy who reached into the cage to make contact. She squeezed his little hand warmly. "So nice to meet you. Is this your sister?" Lucy Gray nodded to the little girl next to him. She stood saucer-eyed as she sucked on a finger. "That's Venus," he said. "She's only 4. Well, I think 4 is a very smart age to be," said Lucy Gray. "Nice to meet you, Venus." "I liked your song," whispered Venus. "You did?" said Lucy Gray. "That's so sweet. Well, you keep watching, Precious, and I'll try to sing you another. Okay?" Venus nodded and then buried her face in her mother's skirt, bringing laughter and a few AWs from the crowd. Lucy Gray began to sidestep her way along the fence, engaging the children as she went. Coriolanus hung back a bit to give her space. Did you bring your snake? A girl clutching a dripping strawberry ice pop asked hopefully. I sure wish I could have. That snake was a particular friend of mine, Lucy Gray told her. Do you have a pet? I have a fish, said the girl. She leaned into the bars. His name is Bub. She transferred her treat to her other hand and reached through the bars for Lucy Gray. Can I touch your dress? Streaks of ruby syrup ran from her fist to her elbow, but Lucy Gray just laughed and offered up a bit of her skirt. The girl ran a tentative finger over the ruffles. It's pretty. I like yours too. The girl's dress was a faded, printed thing, nothing to remark on. But Lucy Gray said, Polka dots always make me feel happy, and the girl beamed. Coriolanus could sense the audience beginning to warm up to his tribute, no longer bothering to keep their distance. People were easy to manipulate when it came to their children. So pleased to see them pleased. Instinctively, Lucy Gray seemed to know this, ignoring the adults as she moved along. She had almost reached one of the cameras and its accompanying reporter. She must have sensed it, but when she rose and found it directly in her face, she gave a slight start, then laughed. Oh, hi there. Are we on television? The Capitol reporter, a young man eager for a story, leaned in hungrily. We certainly are. And who might you be? She asked. I'm Lepidus Malmsey with Capitol News, he said, flashing a grin. So, Lucy, you're the tribute from District 12? It's Lucy Gray, and I'm not really from 12, she said. My people are Covey, musicians by trade. We just took a wrong turn one day and were obliged to stay. Oh, so. What district are you from, then? Asked Lepidus. No district in particular. We move from place to place as the fancy takes us. Lucy Gray caught herself. Well, we used to anyway. Before the peacekeepers rounded us up a few years back. But now you're District 12 citizens, he insisted. If you say so. Lucy Gray's eyes drifted back to the crowd, as if she was in danger of being bored. The reporter could feel her slipping away. Your dress has been a big hit in the Capitol. Has it? Well, the Covey love color and me more than most. But this was my mama's, so it's extra special to me, she said. She in District 12? Lepidus asked. Just her bones, darling. Just her pearly white bones. Lucy Gray stared directly at the reporter, who seemed to have trouble forming his next question. She watched him struggle for a moment, then gestured to Coriolanus. So, do you know my mentor? Says his name is Coriolanus Snow. He's a Capitol boy, and clearly I got the cake with the cream, because nobody else's mentor even bothered to show up to welcome them. Well, he gave us all a surprise. Did your teachers tell you to be here, Coriolanus? Asked Lepidus. Coriolanus stepped toward the camera and tried for likable with a hint of roguishness. They didn't tell me not to. Laughter rippled through the crowd. But I do remember them saying that I was to introduce Lucy Gray to the Capitol, and I take that job seriously. So you didn't have a second thought about diving into a cage of tributes? Prompted the reporter. A second, a third, and I imagine the fourth and fifth will be hitting me sometime soon, admitted Coriolanus. But if she's brave enough to be here, shouldn't I be? Oh, for the record, I didn't have a choice, said Lucy Gray. For the record, neither did I, said Coriolanus. After I heard you sing, I couldn't keep away. I confess, I'm a fan. Lucy Gray gave her skirt a swish as a smattering of applause came from the crowd. Well, I hope for your sake the Academy agrees with you, Coriolanus, said Lepidus. I think you're about to find out. Coriolanus turned to see metal doors, their windows reinforced with grates, swinging open in the back of the monkey house. A quartet of peacekeepers marched in and headed straight for him. He turned to the camera, intent on making a good exit. Thank you for joining us, he said. Remember, it's Lucy Gray Baird, representing District 12. Drop by the zoo if you have a minute and say hello. I promise she's well worth the effort. Lucy Gray extended her hand to him with the delicate droop of the wrist that invited a kiss. He obliged, and when his lips brushed her skin, he felt a pleasant tingle. After giving the audience one last wave, he stepped up calmly to meet the peacekeepers. One nodded tersely, and without a word he followed them from the enclosure to a respectable applause. When the doors closed behind him, his breath came out in a huff, and he realized how afraid he'd been. He silently congratulated himself for maintaining grace under pressure, but the scowls of the peacekeepers suggested they did not share his opinion. What are you playing at? A peacekeeper demanded. You're not allowed in there. So I thought, until your cohorts unceremoniously dumped me down a chute, Coriolanus replied. He thought the combination of cohorts and unceremoniously had just the right note of superiority. I only signed up for the ride to the zoo. I'd be happy to explain the whole thing to your presiding officer and identify the peacekeepers who did this. But to you, I offer my thanks. Uh-huh, she said flatly. We have orders to escort you to the academy. Even better, said Coriolanus, sounding more confident than he felt. The quick reaction from the school unsettled him. Although the television in the back seat of the peacekeeper van was broken, he was able to catch glimpses of the story along the way on the huge public screens that dotted the Capitol. Nervous energy began to bubble up as he saw images of first Lucy Gray, then himself, beaming out over the city. He could never have planned anything this audacious, but since it had happened, he might as well enjoy it. And really, he thought, he had given a fine performance. Kept his head, stood his ground, featured the girl, and she was a natural, handled it all with dignity and a little ironic humor. By the time he reached the academy, he had recovered his composure and ascended the steps with assurance. It helped that every head was turning his way, and had there been no peacekeepers to hold them at bay, he felt sure his schoolmates would have swarmed him. He thought he'd be taken to the office, but the guard deposited him on the bench outside the door to, of all places, the high biology lab, which was restricted to the senior students most gifted in the science. Although it was not his favorite subject, the smell of formaldehyde triggered his gag reflex, and he loathed working with a partner. He did sufficiently well in genetic manipulation to have landed a spot in the class. Nothing like that was Io Jasper, who seemed to have been born with a microscope attached to her eye. He was always gracious to Io, though, and as a result, she adored him. With unpopular people, such a minor effort went such a long way, but who was he to feel superior? Across from the bench on the bulletin board for student notices, a memo had been posted. It read, District 1 boy Livia Cardew girl, Palmyra Monte District 2 boy Sejanus Plinth girl, Flora's friend, District 3, boy Io Jasper girl. Urban Canville District 4 boy Persephone Price girl, Festus Creed District 5. 10th Hunger Games mentor assignments. Boy Dennis, Fling girl Iphigenia Moss District 6 boy, Apollo Ring girl Diana. Ring District 7 boy, Phipsonia. Sickle girl, Pliny Harrington District. 8 boy Juno Phipps, girl Hilarious Heavensby District. 9 boy Gaius Breen girl, Androcles Anderson District. 10 boy Dumicha Wimsuik girl, Arachne Crane District. 11 boy Clemencia Dovecote girl, Felix Ravensdale District. 12 boy Lysistrata Vickers girl Coriolanus Snow. Could there be a more stinging public reminder of his precarious position than to be dangling there at the end like an afterthought? After Coriolanus spent a few minutes puzzling over why he'd been brought to the lab, the guard told him he could go in. At his tentative knock, a voice he recognized as Dean Highbottom's bid him enter. He had expected Satyria to be present, but found only one other person in the lab, a small, stooped old woman with frizzy gray hair who was teasing a caged rabbit with a metal rod. She poked at it through the mesh until the creature, which had been modified to have the jaw strength of a pit bull, yanked the thing from her hand and snapped it in two. Then she straightened as well as she could, turned her attention to Coriolanus, and exclaimed, Hippity, hoppity. Dr. Volumnia Gall, the head game maker and mastermind behind the Capitol's Experimental Weapons Division, had unnerved Coriolanus since childhood. On a school field trip, his class of 9-year-olds had watched as she'd melted the flesh off a lab rat with some sort of laser, and then asked if anyone had any pets they were tired of. Coriolanus had no pets. How could they afford to feed one? But Pluribus Bell had a fluffy white cat named Boa Bell that would lie in her owner's lap and bat around the ends of his powdered wig. She had taken a fancy to Coriolanus and would start up a raspy mechanical purr the moment he petted her head. On those dreary days when he'd slogged through the wintry slush to trade back a bag of lima beans for more cabbage, it was her silly, silky warmth that had consoled him. It upset him to think of Boa Bell ending up in the lab. Coriolanus knew Dr. Gall taught a class at the university, but he'd seldom seen her at the academy. As head game maker, though, anything related to the Hunger Games fell under her purview. Could his trip to the zoo have brought her here? Was he about to lose his mentorship? Hippity hoppity. Dr. Gall grinned. How was the zoo? Then she was laughing. It's like a children's rhyme. Hippity hoppity, how was the zoo? You fell in a cage and your tribute did too. Coriolanus's lips stretched into a weak smile as his eyes darted over to Dean Highbottom for some clue as to how to react. The man sat slumped at a lab table, rubbing his temple in a way that suggested he had a pounding headache. No help there. I did, Coriolanus said. We did. We fell in a cage. Dr. Gall raised her eyebrows at him as if expecting more. And we landed on stage, he added. Ha, exactly. That's exactly what you did. Dr. Gall gave him an approving look. You're good at games. Maybe one day you'll be a game maker. The thought had never crossed his mind. No disrespect to Remus. But it didn't seem like much of a job, or like it required any particular skill, tossing kids and weapons in an arena, and letting them fight it out. He supposed they had to organize the reapings and film the games, but he hoped for a more challenging career. I've got a great deal to learn before I can even think of that, he said modestly. The instinct is there. That's what matters, said Dr. Gall. So, tell me, what made you go into the cage? It had been an accident. He was about to say so when he thought of Lucy Gray, whispering the words, "Own it." Well, my tribute. She's on the small side. The kind who's gone in the first 5 minutes of the Hunger Games. But she's appealing in a scruffy sort of way. With the singing, and all. Coriolanus paused for a moment, as if reviewing his plan. I don't think she stands a chance of winning, but that isn't the point, is it? I was told we were trying to engage the audience. That's my assignment, to get people to watch. So I asked myself, how do I even reach the audience? I go where the cameras are. Dr. Gall nodded. Yes, there's no Hunger Games without the audience. She turned to the dean. You see, Casca, this one took the initiative. He understands the importance of keeping the games alive. Dean Highbottom squinted at him skeptically. Does he? Or is he just showboating for a better grade? What do you think the purpose of the Hunger Games is, Coriolanus? To punish the districts for the rebellion, Coriolanus said without hesitation. Yes, but punishment could take a myriad of forms, said the dean. Why the Hunger Games? Coriolanus opened his mouth and then hesitated. Why the Hunger Games? Why not just drop bombs, or cancel food shipments, or stage executions on the steps of the district justice buildings? His mind jumped to Lucy Gray kneeling at the bars of the cage, engaging the children, the thawing of the crowd. They were connected in some way that he couldn't quite articulate. It's because of the children. How they matter to people. How do they matter? Dean Highbottom pressed. People love children, said Coriolanus. But even as the words came out of his mouth, he questioned them. During the war, he had been bombed and starved and abused in multiple ways, and not just by the rebels. A cabbage ripped from his hands. A peacekeeper bruising his jaw when he mistakenly wandered too close to the president's mansion. He thought of the time he had collapsed and lain in the street with the swan flu, and no one would stop to help, racked with chills, burning with fever, limbs spiked with pain. Even though she was sick herself, Tigress had found him that night and somehow gotten him home. He faltered. Sometimes they do, he added, but it lacked conviction. When he thought about it, people's love of children seemed a very fickle thing. I don't know why, he admitted. Dean Highbottom shot Dr. Gall a look. You see, it's a failed experiment. It is if no one watches, she snapped back. She gave Coriolanus an indulgent smile. He's a child himself. Give him time. I've got a good feeling about this one. Well, I'm off to visit my mutts. She patted Coriolanus on the arm as she shuffled toward the door. Very hush-hush, but there's something wonderful going on with the reptiles. Coriolanus made as if to follow, but Dean Highbottom's voice stopped him. So your whole performance was planned? That's odd. Because when you stood up in the cage, I thought you were thinking about running. It was a rather more physical entrance than I had envisioned. It took some time to get my bearings. Again, I have a great many things to learn, said Coriolanus. Boundaries being among them. You'll be receiving a demerit for engaging in reckless behavior that could have injured a student, you, namely. It will go on your permanent record, said the dean. A demerit? What did that even mean? Coriolanus would have to review the academy student guide so he could object to the punishment. He was distracted by the dean, who pulled a small bottle from his pocket, twisted it open, and applied 3 drops of clear liquid to his tongue. Whatever was in the bottle, most likely morphling, worked quickly, because Dean Highbottom's whole body relaxed and a dreaminess settled in his eyes. He smiled unpleasantly. 3 such demerits, and you'll be expelled.